It was a warm Sunday afternoon in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of town. Birds were singing, kids were playing, and everything seemed peaceful. But inside one small house on Maple Street, everything was falling apart. Danielle Brooks, a single mother of two, was standing in her living room, terrified. Her 14-year-old son, Jaden, had suddenly collapsed on the floor. His body was shaking and his lips were turning pale. Danielle froze for a second, her heart racing. Then she grabbed her phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. "Please help me," she cried. "My son, he's not breathing right." The operator asked calm questions, trying to keep her focused. "Ma'am, is he awake? Is he breathing?" Danielle knelt beside her son. "He's breathing, but it's weak."
"Please send someone fast!"
The operator told her to stay on the line. Help was on the way. Danielle did exactly that. She held her son's hand, whispered, "You're okay, baby, you're okay." But she could hear the panic in her own voice. Every second felt like forever. She looked out the window, waiting for the sound of sirens. But what came down the street first wasn't an ambulance, it was a police car. Two officers stepped out quickly. Danielle ran to the door, relieved and confused. "Thank God you're here," she said. "My son, he's inside, he needs help." But the officers didn't move toward her son. They looked at Danielle instead, their eyes sharp, their tone suspicious. "Ma'am, calm down," one officer said. "What's going on here?" Danielle tried to explain again. "My son can't breathe." "Please help him." But the second officer placed his hand on his belt near his weapon. "We got a call about a disturbance," he said firmly. "We need to make sure everything is safe here." Danielle blinked in disbelief. "A disturbance?" "No, I called you. I called 911. Her voice shook, and her hands were up as if to show she meant no harm. But the officers exchanged a look that said they didn't believe her. One stepped closer. Inside, Jaden was still on the floor, gasping for air. His small body twitched. The sound of his weak breathing filled the silent room. Danielle pointed toward him desperately. "Please, look at my son. He needs help." But the officers didn't even look. One of them said, "Ma'am, step back, please." She shook her head. "No, please help my child first." That's when things started to change. The air in the room became heavy. The officers' voices grew louder. The calmness was gone. "Step back now," the taller officer shouted. Danielle was confused and scared. She didn't understand why they were yelling. She was just a mother asking for help. She took one small step forward, hoping they would finally look at her son. That's when one officer grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" she screamed, pulling away. "Ma'am, don't resist." "Resist? I'm not resisting. My son needs help." The struggle lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Her phone fell to the floor. The 911 operator's voice could still be heard faintly, calling her name through the speaker. A neighbor from across the street, hearing the noise, started recording from her window. The video showed Danielle crying and trying to point to her son on the floor, but the officers were too focused on her. "Please," Danielle sobbed. "He can't breathe." But her voice was drowned out by the sound of shouting and confusion. One officer looked around and said, "Where's the boy?" Danielle, now on her knees, pointed toward the living room again. "There, he's right there." Finally, one of them noticed the boy on the ground. His breathing had slowed. His body was still. The officer's face changed for a moment. Shock, maybe guilt, but it was too late. The damage was done. The neighbor's camera caught everything. The panic, the shouting, the handcuffs being pulled out even before an ambulance arrived. When the paramedics finally came, they rushed straight to Jaden. Danielle tried to crawl toward him, but one officer blocked her path. "Stay back, ma'am," he said coldly. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "That's my baby, please. Let me go to him." But he didn't move. The neighbor's camera zoomed in as Danielle was forced to her feet. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was breaking. "Why are you doing this to me?" she whispered. The only answer was silence, and the sound of her son being lifted onto a stretcher. As the ambulance drove away, Danielle was still standing in handcuffs on her own porch. Her eyes followed the flashing red lights disappearing down the street. In that moment, everything inside her broke. She had called for help and ended up treated like a criminal. The neighbor's video would later go viral. Millions of people would watch it and ask the same question. How did a mother's call for help turn into a scene of injustice? But right now, in that quiet neighborhood, only one sound filled the air, Danielle's cry echoing down the empty street. The flashing blue and red lights painted the quiet street like a warning sign. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, whispering. What had started as a call for help had now become something darker, something no one yet understood. Danielle Brooks stood on her porch, her wrists red and sore from the cold metal cuffs. Her son Jaden was gone, taken away in an ambulance. But inside her house, the sound of heavy boots and radios filled the air. 2 more police cars had arrived. The front door was wide open. Danielle's home, her safe space, now looked like a crime scene. Officer Reed, tall and sharp-faced, walked in first. His partner, Officer Miles, followed behind him. Holding a small notepad, Reed's eyes scanned the living room, the couch, the broken phone on the floor. Everything about his face said one thing: suspicion. "Where's the suspect?" he asked coldly. The first officer, still holding Danielle by the arm, replied, "It's her." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Her? The mother?" "That's right. Claimed she called 911, said her son was sick. But when we got here, she got aggressive." Aggressive. The word echoed in Danielle's head like thunder. She wanted to scream. To tell them she wasn't aggressive. She was desperate, but her voice was gone, trapped somewhere behind the fear. Reed walked closer. "Ma'am, why did you call 911? Danielle swallowed hard. Her voice trembled. "My son. He couldn't breathe. I needed help." Reed didn't write that down. He just stared at her, his eyes narrow, like he was looking for a lie hiding in her words. Then he pointed to the broken phone on the floor. "Is that yours?" "Yes," she said quietly. "It fell when they grabbed me." He nodded slowly, still not believing her. "Why did your son collapse?" "Drugs? Allergic reaction? What happened here?" Danielle shook her head, tears starting to fall again. "I don't know. He just fell down. Please, I need to go to the hospital. I need to see him." Reed turned to his partner and muttered, "She's nervous. Probably hiding something." The other officer scribbled notes quickly. Danielle's heart dropped. She felt invisible, like her truth didn't matter. Outside, a crowd was forming. Neighbors were standing on the sidewalk, phones raised, recording. Someone shouted, "She didn't do anything. Leave her alone!" But the officers didn't care. One of them closed the door, blocking out the voices. Inside, the house was quiet again, too quiet. Only the sound of Danielle's breathing filled the room. She felt the walls closing in. Every minute away from her son was torture. Officer Reed looked around the living room again. His eyes landed on a small photo frame sitting on a shelf. Danielle and Jaden, smiling, holding ice cream. He picked it up, studied it for a moment, then placed it down slowly. "Single mom?" he asked. Danielle nodded. "Anyone else live here?" "No. Just me and my kids." Reed turned back to his partner. "Get CPS on standby. If the boy's hurt, this could turn into a neglect case." Danielle froze. Her eyes went wide. "What? Neglect? No. You don't understand." Reed raised his hand. "Ma'am, calm down. Stop saying that," she cried. "I am calm." "You're not listening." Her voice cracked. It wasn't anger. It was pain. The pain of being unheard, unseen, unprotected. Reed sighed, writing something in his report. "That attitude won't help you." Danielle stared at him with disbelief. "My son could have died. And you're writing reports?" For a second, their eyes met. And in that silence, there was something powerful. Danielle wasn't just scared anymore. She was angry. The kind of anger that comes when you realize you're completely powerless. Then, suddenly, a sound broke the tension. A knock on the door. It was a woman's voice. "Officer, I have something you need to see." It was the neighbor, the one who had filmed everything. Reed opened the door halfway. "Ma'am, you can't—" She cut him off. "I think you'll want to see this video." She held up her phone. On the screen, it showed everything from earlier. The moment Danielle begged for help. The way she was pushed to the ground. The officers shouting at her. The truth, clear as day. Reed took the phone and watched. His face changed, just slightly. The room fell silent. For the first time, Reed didn't look confident. His jaw tightened. His partner stopped writing. Danielle stood there, eyes filled with tears. "Now do you believe me?" Reed didn't answer. He just handed the phone back. "Ma'am, we'll need to review this evidence," he said quietly. but his voice had lost its power. The control he had was slipping away. Outside, sirens wailed again. News vans were already pulling up. The story was spreading. Fast. Danielle stood by the window, looking out at the flashing lights. The cameras, the growing crowd. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Her fear was slowly turning into something else. Something stronger. Something called fight. As the officers stepped outside to make calls and talk to the press, Danielle whispered to herself, "They came for me like I was the danger." But the real danger was the way they saw me. And for the first time since that 911 call, she looked straight at the camera and didn't look away. The world was watching now, and the truth had just arrived. The night air was heavy. Blue and red lights still flashed across the walls of Danielle's small house, painting everything in chaos. Reporters were outside. Neighbors were still recording. The sound of police radios mixed with whispers and sirens. Inside, Danielle Brooks sat on her couch, still in handcuffs. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Every minute felt like an hour. She didn't know if her son, Jaden, was alive, if he was safe, or even if anyone believed her anymore. Officer Reed stood near the door, talking on his radio. His voice was low but sharp. "Yeah, we've got the footage. Send the supervisor down here now." Danielle could hear every word, but none of it made sense. All she wanted was her child. Her heart was racing. Her thoughts spun in circles. Why did they treat me like this? Why didn't they help him? Why did I call at all? Suddenly, the front door opened again. A tall man in a gray jacket stepped inside, the police captain. His face was hard, unreadable. He looked around the room slowly, then at Danielle. "This the woman?" he asked. Reed nodded. "Yes, sir. She's the one who called 911. The captain walked closer. "Take the cuffs off." Reed hesitated. "Sir?" "Take them off," the captain repeated. His tone was flat, but something about his voice carried authority. Reed unlocked the cuffs, and the sound of the metal clicking open echoed in the quiet room. Danielle rubbed her wrists gently. Her skin marked red. The captain sat across from her. "Ms. Brooks," he began, "we've reviewed some of the video from your neighbor. It appears there may have been a misunderstanding." Danielle looked up, her voice shaky. "A misunderstanding? You pushed me to the ground while my son was dying." The captain's jaw tightened. "We're still looking into it." "Looking into it," she repeated. "My boy couldn't breathe. I begged for help. And your officers handcuffed me instead." Her voice rose, raw and powerful. Everyone in the room froze. Even Reed didn't speak. Danielle stood up, her body trembling, but her spirit unbroken. "You think I don't know what this is?" she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You saw a black woman crying for help, and you thought I was a threat." No one answered. The silence was louder than any siren outside. The captain tried to stay calm.
Ma'am, please, no.
Danielle shouted, pointing toward the door. "If I was anyone else, you would have helped me." "But you didn't see a mother. You saw a suspect." Her words hit like bullets, quiet, slow, and impossible to ignore. The captain stood, his expression cold. "We'll be conducting an internal review. You'll be contacted." Then he turned to leave. But before he reached the door, another sound broke through the noise, the buzz of a phone. Reed pulled out his device. The screen glowed with a new message. He read it once. His face changed instantly. "Sir," he said, "the hospital just called." "The boy's awake." Danielle's eyes widened. "Jaden?" Reed nodded. "Yes, they said he's stable." Danielle gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears streamed down her face again, this time from relief. She whispered, "Thank you, God." But before she could leave, Reed stopped her. "You can't go yet. We still need your statement." Her relief turned back into frustration. "My statement?" "My son almost died!" Reed's radio crackled again. Another message, but this time his voice turned serious. "Sir, there's more." The captain frowned. "What now?" Reed read from his phone. "A second video just uploaded. Different angle. It shows everything, clearly." The room went silent again. Everyone looked at each other. Reed turned the screen around. The video showed exactly what happened. From the moment Danielle opened the door to the moment she was forced to the ground. No yelling. No threat. Just a mother begging for help. Danielle watched in disbelief. "That's the truth," she whispered. Outside, people had already seen the new video. Crowds were gathering. News vans were setting up lights. The story had spread across social media in minutes. Justice for Danielle was everywhere. Inside, the captain turned to Reed and said quietly, "Get the department lawyer on the phone." Danielle looked around her own house, the same walls that once felt safe, now covered in shadows and flashing lights. Her fear was gone now. Only determination remained. She took a deep breath and stood tall. "I want to see my son," she said. The captain hesitated but finally nodded. "We'll take you." As they walked her outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted her name, asking what happened. Danielle didn't speak. She looked straight ahead, calm and powerful. One reporter called out, "Danielle, what will you do next?" She turned her head slightly, her voice steady. "I'm going to make sure this never happens to another mother." The cameras clicked. The crowd cheered, and as she stepped into the police car, this time not as a suspect, but as a survivor, the whole world began to listen. But deep inside the department, something darker was brewing. Not everyone wanted the truth to come out. Not everyone was ready for what was coming next. The struggle had just begun. The night sky over Maple Street glowed with flashing lights. Cameras clicked. Voices shouted. The air was thick with tension. What started as one mother's cry for help had become a national story. Danielle Brooks stood outside her home, surrounded by reporters, microphones, and flashing cameras. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. She had just come from the hospital. Jaden was stable, breathing, alive. But the moment she stepped out, everything changed again. 2 police cars pulled up fast, doors opened, out came officers. The same ones who had handcuffed her hours earlier. The crowd went silent. Even the cameras paused. "Officer." Reed stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The police captain was behind him, phone pressed to his ear, whispering something urgent. Danielle's heart started racing again. "What's happening?" she asked softly. No one answered. Then Reed looked straight at her and said the words no one expected. "Danielle Brooks, you are under arrest." The crowd erupted. "What? You can't do that." "She's the victim." Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in, people screamed for answers. Danielle stood frozen. "Under arrest? For what?" Reed didn't look her in the eyes. "Obstruction of justice," he said. "Interfering with police duties." It was a lie, and everyone there knew it. Danielle shook her head slowly. "You're arresting me for asking for help." Reed didn't respond. He reached for his cuffs, but this time Danielle stepped back. "No," she said firmly. "Not this time." The crowd began chanting. "Let her go! Let her go!" Phones were raised high. The world was watching live. Danielle's story was trending on every screen, every news channel, every heart. The captain barked an order. "Get control of the situation." But control was already gone. A journalist shouted, "Officer Reed, are you aware that 2 videos show excessive force?" Another yelled, "Why is she being arrested again?" Reed's jaw tightened. "Step back," he ordered, but the crowd didn't move. Someone in the back yelled, "This is what injustice looks like." Danielle's hands were shaking, but she lifted them slowly, not in surrender, but in power. Her voice rose above the noise. "I called 911 for my child, and this is what they did to me." The crowd roared. The chant grew louder. "Justice for Danielle! Justice for Danielle!" Reed hesitated, looking at his captain, but the captain wasn't watching him. He was watching the cameras. He knew this was spiraling out of control. He knew every move now would be judged by millions. "Stand down," the captain finally ordered. Reed froze. "Sir, stand down." Reluctantly, Reed lowered his hands. The cuffs never touched Danielle this time. The crowd cheered. People clapped. Danielle stood tall, breathing heavily, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. She looked straight into the nearest camera and spoke softly, but her words carried across the world. "You tried to silence me, but now everyone can hear me." At that exact moment, a woman pushed through the crowd, the same neighbor who filmed everything. She held her phone high. "I have more footage," she shouted. "They lied about everything!" She played it for everyone to see, a clip showing Danielle crying for help, begging them to look at her son, and being ignored. The crowd gasped. The truth wasn't just whispered now, it was shouted. The police captain turned red. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. The mayor's office was calling. He stepped aside to answer, his voice shaking. Yes, sir. Yes, it's bad. I know. Danielle stood silently in the center of it all. The lights, the cameras, the chaos. She looked at Reed, who still avoided her eyes. You could have helped me, she said quietly. You could have saved him faster. Reed finally looked at her, and for a moment guilt flickered in his eyes. But only for a moment. He turned away, ashamed. Within minutes, news channels started broadcasting live. Police department under fire after viral arrest video. Black mother wrongfully detained after calling 911. The world was watching, and the department was cornered. By midnight, protests began forming outside the police station. People carried signs with Danielle's face and words. I called for help. They called me a threat. The same officers who once acted with power now hid behind walls and silence. The system was shaking, and it started with one woman's voice. Inside her car, Danielle finally sat down, exhausted. Her phone buzzed with messages, reporters, lawyers, strangers offering support, but she ignored them all and whispered softly to herself. They tried to break me. But I'm still standing. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain began to fall, washing over the flashing lights, the anger, the noise. Danielle closed her eyes. She could still hear her son's weak voice at the hospital, saying, Mom, I saw you on TV, and in that moment, she smiled through her tears. The world had tried to silence her, but instead, it gave her a microphone, and she was just getting started. By morning, the whole city knew her name, Danielle Brooks, the woman who called 911 and ended up in handcuffs. Her face was everywhere, on phones, on TVs, on billboards downtown. The video, once just a shaky clip filmed by a neighbor, had now spread across the world like wildfire. It had been watched over 10 million times in less than 12 hours. The headline said it all. Black mother arrested. After calling for help, police brutality caught on camera. The city was awake, angry and loud. Outside the police department, hundreds of people stood shoulder to shoulder. They held signs that read, Justice for Danielle. Stop treating our pain like a crime. The crowd's chants echoed through the streets. Say her name. Danielle Brooks! Inside her small apartment, Danielle sat at her kitchen table. Holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from reporters, messages from strangers, some kind, some cruel. She scrolled through her screen. One comment said, We stand with you, Danielle. You are every mother. Another said, This isn't just her story. This is America's story. But then there were others. Dark, hateful messages from people she didn't know. They called her a liar. They said she was playing victim. Danielle read them quietly, then turned off her phone. For a moment, she just sat there, the weight of the world pressing down on her. Then came a knock on the door. 3 slow, firm knocks. She opened it carefully. Standing there was a woman with a camera crew and a soft smile. Danielle Brooks? She asked. I'm from Channel 7 News. Can we talk? Danielle hesitated. The cameras had taken so much from her already, but something inside her said, no more hiding. She nodded. Come in. They set up their equipment quickly, lights, mics, cameras. The woman sat across from her. Danielle, she said softly, the world has seen the video, but they haven't heard your voice. What do you want people to know? Danielle took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes were steady. I want people to know, she said slowly, that I didn't call for a fight. I called for help. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I called because my son couldn't breathe, and instead of help, I got fear. I got treated like a threat in my own home. The reporter nodded. Do you think this was about race? Danielle looked down for a moment, then back up. Yes, she said quietly. If my skin was lighter, maybe they would have listened. Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that carries truth. Outside, the protests grew louder. Crowds blocked traffic. People held candles and sang softly. Someone had painted a mural of Danielle and Jaden on the side of a building, her arms around him. Her face proud, her words written below. No mother should fear calling 911. That image became the symbol of a movement. By noon, celebrities were posting about her. News anchors debated her case on live TV. Politicians made statements, and hashtags flooded every platform. Justice for Danielle. Protect black mothers. Reform now. But while the world demanded answers, the police department stayed silent. Their only statement was short and cold. The incident is under internal investigation. Behind those walls, tension was boiling. Officer Reed sat in a small interrogation room. His hands folded. Across from him, two investigators played the video again. Slow motion, frame by frame. "Why didn't you call paramedics first?" one asked. Reed said nothing. His jaw tightened. Sweat ran down his temple. They pressed play again. The sound of Danielle's voice filled the room. "Please, my son can't breathe." The investigator paused the video. "She's clearly asking for help. Why did you see her as a threat?" Reed finally looked up. "I don't know," he said quietly. "We were told to control the scene." The investigator leaned forward. "And instead you lost it." Meanwhile, the captain met with city officials behind closed doors. They were nervous, terrified of what would happen next. The mayor had already demanded a report. The media wanted answers. The people wanted justice. Someone suggested suspend the officers, calm the crowd. Another said, that won't be enough. Because this was bigger than suspension. This was about truth. And truth was spreading faster than fear. That night, Danielle appeared live on national television for the first time. The lights were bright. The cameras rolled. The world was listening. The host asked her, "Danielle, what do you hope comes from all this?" She paused, looking straight into the lens. "I want change," she said softly. "Not revenge, change. I want every mother, every father, every child to know they can call for help and not be seen as a danger." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice didn't break. "I want my son to grow up in a world that listens, not one that judges." When the interview ended, millions of viewers sat in silence. Then, one by one, they stood up. Outside, the chants grew louder. People marched through the streets with candles in their hands. Her pain had become a flame, and now the world was burning with it. But in the shadows, not everyone was cheering. Inside the police headquarters, a man closed his office door and whispered into a phone, "She's gaining too much attention. We need to control this, because when truth becomes powerful, the system always fights back." And for Danielle Brooks, the fight was far from over. 3 days after the video went viral, the city was no longer calm. Protests filled every street. Chants of "Justice for Danielle" echoed through city halls, schools, and churches. Danielle Brooks had become more than a name. She was now a symbol, a voice for the voiceless. But behind the cameras, something darker was happening. Inside the police department, panic had replaced confidence. The chief sat behind his desk, staring at the wall of screens showing news coverage from every channel. The words, "Police Brutality Investigation," flashed again and again. He slammed his hand on the table. "Who leaked the second video?" he shouted. No one answered. Officers stood frozen. Even Captain Reed stayed silent. The chief's eyes burned with frustration. "Find out who's responsible and shut it down." But it was already too late. The truth had escaped, and it couldn't be contained. That morning, a new clip appeared online. Longer, clearer, impossible to deny. It wasn't recorded by a neighbor this time. It was body cam footage. Someone inside the department had leaked it anonymously. The file was titled, "The Full Story, Unedited." The footage began with the two responding officers approaching Danielle's door. Their tone was aggressive from the start. The words "disturbance" call flashed on the radio. Not medical emergency. Then came the moment the world had never seen. Just before Danielle opened her door, one officer said to the other, "Be ready." These people always get loud. That one line broke the internet. Social media exploded. News anchors played the clip again and again. People cried, shouted, protested harder. Commentators called it proof. Proof of bias. Proof of racism. Proof of how quickly fear can replace humanity. Danielle watched the footage from her living room, tears streaming down her face. Her son Jaden sat beside her, still weak but recovering. He looked at her quietly and said, "They finally see, Mom." She nodded, unable to speak. By afternoon, city officials were forced to act. The mayor held a press conference in front of City Hall. flanked by police and lawyers. He faced a sea of reporters. He cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence, we have found major violations of department policy. Effective immediately, Officers Reed and Miles are suspended without pay pending criminal investigation. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half furious that it took this long. Reporters shouted questions. Will the chief resign? Will Danielle receive justice? Who leaked the footage? But the mayor gave no answers. Behind him, the police chief's face turned pale. He knew something more was coming. Something that could destroy everything. That evening, Danielle received a mysterious message on her phone. It was from an unknown number. No words, just a video file. She hesitated, then pressed play. The screen showed a dark office, grainy security camera footage. The chief was there, talking to Captain Reed. The audio was faint but clear enough. Delete the footage. If the public sees this, we're finished. Danielle froze, her breath caught in her throat. She replayed it again and again, just to be sure. Someone had recorded the chief trying to cover it up. She didn't know who sent it, but she knew what it meant. This wasn't just about two bad officers. This was about the system itself. She called her lawyer immediately. Send this to every news outlet you can, she said. They tried to hide the truth. Now the world will see everything. Within hours, the video aired nationwide. The story shifted from police brutality to police corruption. The department was now under federal investigation. Protesters surrounded City Hall. Through the night, people chanted, sang, cried. It wasn't just Danielle's fight anymore. It was everyone's. Inside her apartment, Danielle stood by the window, watching the lights in the distance. Her son lay asleep on the couch, his breathing slow and peaceful. The world outside was chaotic, but her heart was calm. For the first time in weeks, she smiled softly. She whispered, "Truth always finds a way." Just then, her phone buzzed again, another message. This time, it wasn't a video. It was a text. There's more. Meet me tomorrow. Same place the video came from? Come alone. Her heart pounded. Who was sending these messages? A whistleblower? A threat? She didn't know, but she knew one thing for sure. Someone inside that department wasn't done talking, and the story wasn't over yet. The next morning, as dawn broke, Danielle put on her jacket and slipped out quietly. Her steps were slow but steady, each one echoed with purpose. The city that once ignored her was now awake and watching. She didn't know what waited for her at the other end of that message, but she knew she had to go because the truth had started with her. And now it was calling her name again. The city was no longer the same. Every street carried her name now, every poster, every chant, every news headline. Justice for Danielle Brooks. But while the world saw victory forming, Danielle was still chasing something deeper. The truth wasn't finished yet. That morning, she stood at the edge of an old parking lot, the place where the unknown message had led her. The air was cold. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from the weight of what she might uncover. She looked around. Empty, silent. Then a car door creaked open from the shadows. A man stepped out. Hoodie up, face half hidden. Danielle's heart pounded. "Who are you?" she asked. He spoke softly, his voice low. Someone who used to believe in the system. He handed her a small flash drive. "This is everything," he whispered. "Body cam logs, radio messages, internal emails. It proves they tried to cover everything up, not just your case. Others too." Danielle froze. "Why are you giving this to me?" The man looked down. "Because I can't watch them lie anymore. What happened to you wasn't a mistake, and it was a pattern. You just got caught in the middle." Before she could ask more, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the fog. She stood there alone, holding the drive tightly in her palm. Her fingers shook, her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of power. For the first time, she realized this fight wasn't just hers anymore. It was bigger than her. By noon, she sat across from her lawyer, eyes focused. They plugged in the drive. File after file appeared on the screen. Emails labeled sensitive, voice recordings between officers, reports marked deleted. Each one revealed a piece of the truth. A system built on silence, a department built on fear. Danielle, her lawyer, whispered, This could take down half the department. She nodded slowly. Then let's make it public. But before they could move, something unexpected happened. The lights in the office flickered. Once, twice, then went out. A loud crash echoed from outside. Tires screeched. Her lawyer ran to the window. A black SUV sped off into the distance. Someone had been watching them. Danielle's heart raced. "They know we have it," she whispered. The lawyer grabbed her hand. "We'll get protection. Don't worry. The truth is safe now." That evening, national news broke the story. The files had been released. Everything, every lie, every cover-up was out. The headlines read, "Systemic Corruption Exposed. Black Mother's Case Opens Federal Probe." The footage spread like fire again. People flooded the streets, holding candles, signs, and hope. The police chief was arrested the next morning. Officers who had lied were suspended. The department was dismantled and rebuilt under federal control. For the first time in decades, the people felt like they had won. But Danielle didn't celebrate right away. She stood in front of the mural of her and Jaden, the one that had become a symbol of courage. The night air was cool, the crowd behind her chanting softly. Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, did we fix it?" She smiled gently and knelt beside him. "Not all of it," she said, "but we started something. And sometimes, that's how change begins." Jaden nodded, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Reporters gathered nearby, waiting for her to speak. She stepped forward, her voice steady, eyes full of fire. "I didn't ask to be a hero," she began. "I was just a mother who wanted help. But the system showed me something. It showed me how fear can silence truth." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "But it also showed me something stronger, that truth doesn't die when people stand together. It grows." The crowd erupted in applause. Tears streamed down faces. Strangers held hands, and for a brief moment, the city felt united again. Weeks later, Danielle testified before Congress. Her story was now evidence. Her voice, once ignored, was now shaping laws. Cameras flashed as she stood under the bright white lights. She looked calm, powerful, unshaken. "Justice," she said softly, "isn't just about punishment. It's about protection. It's about making sure no mother ever has to fear calling for help again." Her words echoed across the room. Even the judges sat in silence. When she finished, she looked up at the crowd. Activists, families, survivors. They rose to their feet, clapping not just for her story, but for every voice she carried with her. Months later, a new community center opened in her neighborhood. The sign above the door read, "The Brooks Foundation, for Justice and Hope." Inside, pictures of families lined the walls. On one side, a small plaque read, "From pain comes power. From silence comes change." Danielle stood there quietly, her son beside her. The world outside was still imperfect, still broken, but brighter than before. She smiled softly. "Jaden," she whispered, "we did it." He looked up at her. "No, Mom," he said. "You did." Later that night, as she stood alone by her window, the city lights glowing below, she opened her phone. Hundreds of messages poured in from mothers, fathers, strangers, all saying the same thing. "Because of you, I'm not afraid to call for help." Danielle's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "That's all I ever wanted." And as the city lights flickered outside, the same city that once tried to silence her, one thing was clear. The system broke her heart. But she rebuilt the truth, and the world would never forget the name, Danielle Brooks.